In 1920, Congress passed the 18th Amendment, making alcohol production and distribution illegal in the United States. And then followed 13 years of chaos.
Cirrhosis. Oh, right, psoriasis is a skin.
P is for Prohibition. That period between 1920 and 1933, when America as a whole went through what every serious drinker eventually confronts, a reckoning with booze. And like a lot of drinkers do and should do every once in a while, it tried to get sober. And ultimately, the country decided that sobriety wasn't its thing. The seeds of Prohibition go back to the country's founding. Americans were starting temperance movements, those are groups that promoted abstinence from alcohol, as early as 1789. And while some of these movements were driven by good old Christian moral shaming, a lot of people got into the temperance game because of how destructive alcohol was to them personally. By all accounts, colonial America was a very drunk place. And while it's easy to romanticize it, you can't ignore how many lives are trampled by rampant drinking, whether their own or somebody else's. Nowadays, people join AA, but back then, they signed temperance pledges and attempted to ban alcohol where they could. Listen to these lyrics from a temperance song written by Stephen Foster, whose name you may not know, but whose songs you definitely do. Oh, Susanna, ring a bell? What about Camptown Races? Yeah, that's Stephen Foster. But he also wrote this, which is sung to the tune of Oh, Susanna.
Now I've signed the pledge at last and gained my liberty. From all intoxicating drinks, I'm entirely free. No more I'll tread the drunkard's path, nor be the willing slave of those who send their victims forth to fill the drunkard's grave. Oh, drink seller, don't you long for me? I'm gonna sign the temperance pledge and gain my liberty. Temperance.
That's catchy, right? And totally relatable? I mean, how many of us have woken up once or twice after a bender and said, no more, I'm done? Well, that's essentially what a big portion of the American population was saying in the 19th century as the temperance movement gained steam. No more. No more people drinking themselves into poverty. No more drunk husbands beating up wives and children. No more public drunkenness and the bad behavior associated with it. The whole state of Kansas went dry as early as 1881, prompting a period of civil discord best encapsulated by this woman, Carrie Nation, who took it upon herself to punish the bars and liquor stores that defied the ruling. She'd walk into a bar, yell at the customers, and then break all of the liquor bottles with an axe, which may be the most American thing ever done. Her first husband died of alcoholism after a life of drunkenly terrorizing his wife and children. No wonder she hated alcohol. And a lot of people in the country did, for reasons good or not. Enough so that by World War I, there was a serious political fight about banning alcohol nationwide. I'll spare you all the legal and governmental details of how it happened, but in 1920, Congress passed the 18th Amendment, making alcohol production and distribution illegal in the United States. And then followed 13 years of chaos. Here are just a few of the repercussions of banning alcohol nationwide. 1. Technically, owning alcohol wasn't illegal, just making and selling it was. So before the ban went into place, rich people, including the president, stockpiled alcohol. Poor people, of course, were fucked over, as they always are in this country. 2. Organized crime took hold of liquor production and distribution and ran a very successful black market on booze. This is where we get moonshine and bathtub gin and souped up muscle cars smuggling booze in from Canada, outrunning the cops, and inventing NASCAR. 3. The booze that people were drinking was often horrific and dangerous, cut with various chemicals, just like today's drug dealers cut heroin with fentanyl. An estimated 10,000 people died during Prohibition from drinking bad alcohol, and countless more were blinded and otherwise messed up in both body and brain. 4. Drinking did decline on a nationwide basis, and cirrhosis, what is it?
Cirrhosis, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, trust yourself.
And cirrhosis death rates for men dropped from 29.5 per 100,000 at the start of Prohibition to 10.7 at the end. But people were still drinking in great numbers, and speakeasies opened up in place of saloons, which meant that a great number of people and business owners were breaking the law and happy to do it. And that lent the age an air of cynicism and lawlessness that many people fretted about just as much as they had fretted over alcohol's effect on people. Basically, it was a train wreck. The agencies tasked with enforcing the rules couldn't keep up, and when the Great Depression hit in 1929, all that lost tax revenue on alcohol was sorely missed. The campaign for repeal gathered steam, culminating in the 21st Amendment, which passed control over all alcohol regulations to the states, which meant booze was back. And that's where we are today. There are still a number of dry counties and towns, and there are some places like New Orleans, see letter N, where you can pretty much drink whenever and wherever you want. Most places are in between. But that doesn't mean that we've figured out our relationship to alcohol as a country, and often as individuals. It's why American teenagers still flee to Montreal and Europe as soon as they can. This is even what American adults did during Prohibition. Grab a flight or a steamer ship to boozier shores like Cuba or London. But we don't educate those people how to drink, or what's good about it, and what's dangerous. Alcohol is a tough bowl to ride, and all the forces behind Prohibition still exist and must be confronted and discussed openly. Alcohol does increase cases of domestic violence, homelessness, and illness. Alcohol does enable poor decisions, but it also increases joy, empathy, and makes what is otherwise a tough life a little easier to take. It is both of these things, and unfortunately, Americans aren't great at gray areas. We're an all or nothing people. We don't talk about alcohol like we don't talk about sex. We avoid it, abstain from it, and wait until kids have left the house and let them mostly figure it out on their own. But like any relationship worth keeping, you can learn to minimize the negative aspects and maximize the positive ones. For instance, there are many helpful lessons in my book, You Suck at Drinking. Alcohol is a gray area, an element of life that can make it better or much worse. How do you deal with that? Well, each drinker must figure that out for themselves, even if that drinker is an entire country. P is for Prohibition, and I'll drink to that.